Today on the show, we're diving into the world of economic indicators. These are the numbers that tell us how the economy is doing, things like GDP, unemployment rates, and consumer confidence. But what do these indicators really mean? How are they calculated, and how should we interpret them? We'll break it all down for you, with the help of some experts, to make sense of the numbers that shape our world. The rancher, his donkey, and the $200 million ghost town secret. With the morning sun stretched its golden fingers across the abandoned streets of Copper Ridge, painting long shadows between the weathered buildings. Jake Coleman adjusted his worn cowboy hat and patted the neck of his faithful donkey. Buster, the old mining town, had been dead for over 50 years, but Jake still made his weekly rounds through its empty streets, checking on the property his grandfather had left him. Most folks thought he was crazy for keeping watch over a ghost town. The nearest living soul was 30 miles away in Millerville, and even they whispered that Jake had spent too many years alone on his ranch. But Jake knew better. Copper Ridge wasn't just empty buildings and broken dreams. It was history. It was family. And today, it was about to become something much more. Buster's ears twitched as they walked down Main Street. The donkey had been Jake's companion for 8 years now, ever since a storm had separated the young animal from a traveling circus. Jake had found him wandering the desert, scared and alone, and something in those big brown eyes had reminded him of himself. They'd been inseparable ever since. The church bell tower rose against the morning sky like a finger pointing toward heaven. Jake remembered his grandfather's stories about Sunday services, when the pews were packed with miners and their families, when children's laughter echoed through these same streets. Now tumbleweeds danced where children once played, and the only sounds were the whisper of wind through broken windows and the soft clip-clop of Buster's hooves on the dusty ground. Jake pulled out his grandfather's pocket watch, a habit he'd developed over the years. 7:30 in the morning, right on schedule. He'd been making this same route every Tuesday for the past decade, walking through the ghost town as if the residents were still sleeping behind their shuttered windows. "Come on, Buster," Jake murmured, his voice carrying in the still air. "Let's check the old bank." The Copper Ridge First National Bank sat at the corner of Main and Silver Street, its facade still impressive despite decades of neglect. The bronze nameplate had turned green with age, and the heavy wooden door sagged on its hinges. Jake had the key, one of many his grandfather had passed down, but he rarely went inside. The building held too many memories, too many what-ifs. Today felt different though. Maybe it was the way the morning light hit the windows, or how Buster kept nudging him toward the bank's entrance. Whatever it was, Jake found himself fishing the old key from his pocket. The lock turned with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The heavy door swung open with a groan that seemed to echo through time itself. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight that followed Jake and Buster inside. The bank's interior was exactly as Jake remembered from his childhood. Visits with his grandfather. Teller windows lined one wall, their brass bars tarnished but intact. A massive safe dominated the back corner, its door hanging open like a mouth frozen mid-scream. His grandfather had told him stories about that safe, about the fortunes it had protected during Copper Ridge's boom years. Buster wandered toward the safe, his hooves clicking on the marble floor. The donkey stopped suddenly, his ears perked forward, staring at something Jake couldn't see. "What is it, boy?" Jake asked, following his companion's gaze. That's when he noticed it, a section of the marble floor near the safe that didn't quite match the rest. The pattern was slightly off, as if the stones had been removed and replaced at some point. Jake knelt down, running his weathered hands over the surface. One of the stones shifted slightly under pressure. His heart began to race. In all his years of exploring Copper Ridge, he'd never noticed this before. With careful fingers, he pried at the loose stone. It came away easily, revealing a small cavity underneath. Inside was a leather pouch wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture and time. Jake's hands trembled as he unwrapped the package. Inside the pouch were documents siloed with age, but still readable. His grandfather's handwriting covered page after page, along with official-looking certificates and maps. The first document made Jake's breath catch in his throat. It was a mining claim, dated 1952, signed by his grandfather and witnessed by the bank president, but it wasn't for the played-out copper mine everyone knew about. This was for a different claim, deeper in the mountains, for a vein of rare earth minerals that his grandfather had discovered. Just before the town's collapse, Jake's grandfather had written detailed notes about the find. The minerals were worth nothing back in 1952, just interesting rocks that made pretty colors when heated. But Jake knew what they were worth today. He'd read about the modern demand for these same rare earth elements, essential for everything from smartphones to electric car batteries. Conservative estimates put the value of such a deposit in the hundreds of millions. A second document explained why his grandfather had hidden the claim. The big mining company that owned most of Copper Ridge had been pushing out small prospectors, buying up claims for pennies on the dollar. Jake's grandfather had realized that his discovery could either make him rich or make him a target. So he'd hidden the evidence and waited for the right time to develop the claim. That time had never come. The town had died faster than anyone expected, and his grandfather had moved away to start a cattle ranch, taking his secret with him. He'd planned to tell Jake about it someday, but a heart attack had taken him before he'd found the courage. The final document was a letter addressed to Jake himself. My dear grandson, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've found what I couldn't bring myself to tell you in life. The claim is yours now, legally and morally. I've kept the payments current through an account in Denver, and the mineral rights are solid. But before you decide what to do with this gift, I want you to think about what Copper Ridge means. It's not just rock and dirt and empty buildings. It's the dreams of everyone who ever called this place home. If you develop this claim, do it in a way that honors their memory. The town deserves to live again, but not as a scar on the landscape. Make it something beautiful. Make it something that would make those old miners proud. All my love, Grandpa Coleman. Jake sat back on his heels. The documents scattered around him like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that suddenly made perfect sense. Buster nuzzled his shoulder, as if sensing the weight of the moment. For years, Jake had struggled to keep his ranch afloat. The cattle business was tough, and he'd been considering selling the property to developers who wanted to turn it into a resort. He'd felt like he was failing his grandfather's legacy, unable to make the land profitable enough to preserve dot. Now everything had changed, but his grandfather's words echoed in his mind. This wasn't just about money, it was about responsibility, about honoring the past while building a future. Jake carefully rewrapped the documents and tucked them inside his jacket. He needed time to think, to plan. This discovery could change everything, not just for him but for the entire region. Done right, it could bring jobs and prosperity back to an area that had been forgotten by progress. As he and Buster made their way back through the ghost town, Jake began to see it differently. Instead of empty buildings, he saw potential. The old saloon could be restored as a community center. The church could hold services again. Families could return. Children could play in these streets. And Copper Ridge could have a second chance at life. The mining operation would need to be carefully planned. Environmental concerns, community impact, sustainable development, all the lessons learned from the mistakes of the past. Jake wasn't going to repeat his predecessor's errors. He thought about calling his lawyer, his banker, maybe even some of the mining companies that had been sniffing around the area. But first, he needed to visit his grandfather's grave and have a long conversation with the old man. The walk back to his truck felt different now. Each step carried the weight of possibility, of dreams that could finally come true. Buster seemed to sense the change too, his gait more energetic, his ears perked forward as if listening to the whispers of a town ready to wake up. As they reached the edge of Copper Ridge, Jake turned back for one last look. The morning sun was higher now, casting the ghost town in warm, golden light. For just a moment, he could almost hear it, the sound of voices, of life, of a community that could be again. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from his neighbor, asking if he was still planning to sell the ranch. Jake looked at the message, then at the hidden documents in his jacket, then at Buster's trusting eyes. He typed back, "Plans have changed. The ranch stays in the family." The drive home was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than Jake was used to. It wasn't the silence of loneliness or resignation. It was the silence of anticipation, of plans forming, of a future that suddenly looked bright with possibility. That evening, Jake sat on his porch with Buster grazing nearby. He'd spent the afternoon researching rare earth mineral markets, sustainable mining practices, and community development projects. The more he learned, the more excited he became about the possibilities. His grandfather had given him more than money or land. He'd given him a chance to be part of something bigger than himself, to help a forgotten place find its way back to life. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold, Jake made a decision. Tomorrow he'd start making calls. But tonight, he'd simply sit with his donkey and dream about the future of Copper Ridge. In the distance, a coyote howled, and Jake could swear he heard an answer echoing from the ghost town, not the cry of another coyote, but something else. Something that sounded almost like hope. The secret that had been buried for 70 years was finally ready to see the light of day. and Jake Coleman, with his faithful donkey by his side, was going to make sure it brought life back to a town that had been sleeping far too long. As the stars emerged overhead, Jake pulled out his grandfather's pocket watch one more time. The hands pointed to 8 o'clock, the start of a new chapter in the story of Copper Ridge. A story that was far from over. Buster wandered over and rested his head against Jake's shoulder, as if to say that whatever came next, they'd face it together, just like they always had. The ghost town might have kept its secret for decades, but now it was time for Copper Ridge to live again, and this time it would do so with wisdom earned through loss, hope tempered by experience, and a partnership between man and donkey that had already proven unbreakable. The $200 million secret was safe in good hands. More importantly, it was in hands that understood that some treasures are worth more than their weight in gold, like second chances, like community, like the bond between a rancher and his donkey, who had just discovered that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single step into the past.